Okay, this is my lecture on Chapter 10 of How to Read a Book, Criticizing a Book Fairly. So we've already seen with the first stage of analytical reading, how to discover what a book is about, and we've already seen with the second stage of analytical reading, how to discover what is being said in detail and how. Now we'll move on to the third stage of analytical reading, and this concerns responding to a book. We'll talk about teachability as a virtue, the importance of suspending judgment, the importance of avoiding contentiousness, and on the resolution of disagreements. So once you've discovered what a book is about, and you've discovered what is being said in detail and how, you're not done reading a book. You're not done. Now you need to analyze the book for its truth, for the arguments, whether they're good or bad. Okay? So you must complete the work of criticism, the work of judging. And in our culture, being critical, judgmental, those are not viewed as positive traits. They're viewed as sort of immoral traits. But that's not necessarily the case of being critical, of being judgmental. Yes, it can be from an attitude, a bad attitude, but just the effort of being critical and the effort of judging, they aren't bad in themselves. So when you take a book and you say, let me sort of criticize this book, be critical of it, to discover, to say whether I think it's true or false, in whole or in part, or whether I think the argument is good or bad. There you're criticizing, you're judging, but it's on matters of whether this book should be listened to or not. And this really isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's a virtuous thing. It helps one come to the truth. So teachability is a virtue that one needs when coming to a book, criticizing a book. Now, teachability, according to Adler, is not subservience, where you're just submitting to the teacher and whatever the teacher says. That's not a virtue. Teachability is actually active and requires that a person freely exercise his or her own power of independent judgment. And this is a great compliment to the author, that you're willing to engage with the author's book to discover what it's about, to discover what is said in detail, and then to assess whether it's true or false in whole or in part, or whether the argument that is being made is good or bad. This shows that the author, that you're taking him or her seriously, and you sort of want to know what they have to say. Now this is teachability. Someone who is willing to engage actively in a work in order to judge whether it's good or bad, right or wrong. So the most teachable reader is therefore the most critical. He is the reader who finally responds to a book by the greatest effort to make up his or her own mind on the matters that the author has discussed. Which leads us to Rule 9 of analytical reading. You must be able to say, with reasonable certainty, I understand, before you can say any one of the following things: I agree, or I disagree, or I suspend judgment. If you can't say what the book is about, and you can't say what is being said in detail and how, then you do not understand the book, and you're in no position to say that you either agree, disagree with it, or suspend judgment on the matter. You're in no position to do that, because you haven't done sort of the necessary preliminary work before casting a judgment on the book. You must say, if you don't understand it, that I cannot yet cast judgment on the book. I cannot yet say whether I agree or disagree with it, because I have not yet understood the author. So, be quick to listen and slow to speak when you're judging a book. Now, what is it to suspend judgment? It's neither to agree nor to disagree, but to withhold taking a position. And this isn't because you don't understand the book. It's not because you don't understand it. We're assuming at this point that you do understand it. It's because you do understand it, but yet maybe you'd like more evidence, either for or against the position. You'd like to investigate it further, or you would like to mull over the issue in your mind more before you cast a judgment. With the second option, it's not necessarily a lack of evidence. It's just a lack of wrestling enough with the evidence that you do have. And so suspension of judgment is important. It's an important option in responding to a book. You're not forced to either agree or disagree with it. You can suspend judgment if you think that you need to consider the matter further, or you haven't considered all the evidence. Okay, and these are the three sole responses one can take to a position. You can either agree with it, you can or disagree with it, or you can suspend judgment. There's no other option. The only other option, I think, is that you don't yet understand it, which means that you can't yet agree or disagree or suspend judgment on the matter. Okay, now it's important also to avoid contentiousness. Here we're talking about the attitude with which you criticize a book. When you disagree, you need to do so reasonably and not disputatiously or contentiously, not with a bad attitude. So if your goal in criticizing a book is to win a battle, you can only win by being an antagonist. Only by disagreeing successfully no matter the cost, whether you're right or whether you're wrong. Now, if you go onto Facebook and you find an argument that's being had between two individuals, well, what you might find there is you might find people who are not concerned about the truth. They're concerned about winning an argument. And so what you'll have is you'll have people who are using various methods, employing various methods that you wouldn't employ if you were seeking to learn the truth. Being very cutting, falsifying evidence, burying objections to your point of view, those sorts of things. And those are people who are not concerned about the truth. They're just concerned about winning. But learning the truth is what matters, not stoking your ego by winning an argument. So what sort of manner should a person take if they're concerned about learning the truth? Well, you have an attitude of grace. You're being gracious to the person with whom you're speaking. You're open to them. You're thinking, hey, I can learn from this person. Like maybe they're right. Maybe they have something that I'm lacking. Or you can also think, well, it's possible that I'm wrong. I need to investigate the evidence. So just a humility and openness, basically, is what you'll find for those who are concerned about learning the truth. And those concerned about winning an argument, you'll find pride and ego. Now, when it comes to disagreements, you have to think, you have to believe that they are capable of being resolved. You have to believe that they're capable of being resolved. Well, the trouble is that many people regard disagreement as unrelated to either teaching or being taught because they think that everything is just a matter of opinion. If everything is just a matter of opinion, well then we don't need to resolve anything at all. You have your opinion and I have mine. But if you regard disagreements as concerning matters of knowledge, well, that is, opinions that can be defended, then you would think that they can be resolved. And they can be resolved by, among other things, removing misunderstanding and or ignorance. So maybe the disagreement is based on misunderstanding. And if party A and party B talk to each other, they can remove the misunderstanding and therefore come to an agreement. Maybe they don't actually disagree over a substantive issue. it's a mere matter of misunderstanding what the other person is actually saying. Or it could be a result of ignorance, so that people do disagree, but it's because one has knowledge that the other doesn't, and if the other one does obtain that knowledge, then maybe the disagreement will be resolved. But to treat everything as just a matter of opinion is to think that there's nothing to be resolved, and there's no way to resolve it. So if I believe that abortion is okay, and you believe that abortion is not okay, if that's all just a matter of opinion, then there's nothing we can say to each other. But if it's on a matter of knowledge, that there is a right or a wrong answer to the matter of abortion, whether it's okay or not, now we can look at evidence, we can look at argument, and we could discover which person is actually correct, which person holds the correct view on abortion, if anybody. And so you have to believe that disagreements are concerning matters of knowledge rather than mere opinion. If you want to be able to resolve them. I mean, certain things are just a matter of opinion. Which is the best flavor of ice cream? What's your favorite movie? Things like that. But then there are certain things that are not, and they concern matters of knowledge, and those are capable of being resolved by removing misunderstanding and ignorance, and I would add bad attitudes and bad dispositions, because pride, for example, can keep one from agreeing with another. I'm not going to agree with you because then that would mean that I'm wrong, right? Okay, so when you're reading a book, you must be sure that your disagreement is not a result of your misunderstanding of the author. So again, you need to be able to understand what the author is saying before you can actually cast a judgment on what the author is saying. And if it's not the result of misunderstanding, you must be able to give reasons for why you disagree. If you can't give reasons for why you disagree, then you're just expressing your sort of opinion that is indefensible. If you can't give reasons, then basically you're saying, I don't like what you have to say, rather than saying, I think what you have to say is incorrect, and here's why. So this goes for the author too. Both the author and the reader must give reasons for their statements of fact. Otherwise, they're expressing their personal opinion, which is unsupported judgment. Okay, so if you find an author making claims without giving evidence or argument, well, then you found an author who's just expressing his or her personal opinion, and you don't need to even contend with them. You just say, well, like, you've just told me what you believe. That's a nice history or a statement of your psychological states, but why don't we talk about matters of fact, whether something genuinely is a fact or not. And the way to do that is to excuse me. The way to do that is to talk about evidence or argument. Okay, rule number 11 of analytical reading. You need to respect the difference between knowledge and mere personal opinion by giving reasons for any critical judgment that you make. If you make a critical judgment and yet you haven't given good reason for your critical judgment, then you've merely expressed your opinion and you haven't, as they say, laid down some knowledge.